Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazal Ministries podcast.
What if Leia trained Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, instead of Luke? We're going to be asking this question and a lot more on today's special What If episode of Systematic Geekology. We are the Priest of the Geeks. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, joined by, of course, one of the greatest people in the land, Kevin Schaefer. How's it going, Kevin?
Oh, man, I appreciate the compliment. But I have to say, you are the one who literally just mastered divinity, so congrats to you there.
Yes, this is the first one I've recorded for the show. Post-graduation, I have, of course, mastered divinity itself. Like I said to Kevin, I only reused that joke like 50, 100 times since I've graduated. It hasn't been that long, but it feels pretty good. I officiated my first wedding. I had a blast with that. I'm I'm in the job search right now for a head pastoral, associate pastoral, maybe even youth leader. We shall see. But for right now, I'm feeling pretty dang good. So,
man,
Kevin,
that's awesome. And we were also talking about, like, if I were ever asked to officiate a wedding, I would have trouble not quoting Spaceballs or Princess Bride or any of that. Like, so the fact that you made it through without doing one of those and took it seriously, I commend you there.
I got the marriage part out in the rehearsals, knowing even that it was still in my mind in the middle of the ceremony. I could say this right now, but I'd rather not get murdered by my mother and be the bride. The bride was closer, but I know my mother would be the first one to get the hit in. So I decided not to, for the sake of everyone else.
I hear you, but it would. Speaking of that, though, now that you have free time again, I think they go on sale next week, but they're doing a Princess Bride screening in Raleigh in August, where Carrie Elwes is going to be there to moderate a panel afterwards and everything. It's just like, I don't know if they're going to have a moderator with him or what, but like he does these like because he wrote that book As You Wish a few years ago, which is excellent if you've not read it. And I'm a huge Princess Bride fan, so I cannot wait for that.
Oh, great. Yeah, I have literally no clue where I'm going to be in the next couple of months.
Sure.
Sending out resumes, figuring that out. So I could be as far as Oregon. I could be in North Carolina. I have no clue. I'm just trusting, and I hate saying that out loud as someone who likes knowing every step of the plan. Just trusting him. So
Absolutely.
We'll see.
Absolutely. But yeah, what I've been geeking out on, there's a lot right now. I don't think I've talked about it on the show yet, and I don't know if any of the other hosts are watching, but I am loving The Studio on Apple TV. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the Seth Rogen show that he co-created and stars in. Him and Evan Goldberg direct every episode, but Seth Rogen plays a disgruntled movie executive who becomes the head of this fictional studio, and it's about him navigating the job and everything, but also he wants to be like the cool guy who is receptive to filmmakers. Yes. So like he like wants to be the cool exec who is friendly to filmmakers and respects their vision. But as much as he loves movies, as much as he loves the filmmakers that he's working with, his ultimate number one job is to make as much money for the studio as possible. So he's caught in this, conundrum of back and forth between respecting creative visions and also, is this going to be marketable and how do I make this marketable? And it's a brilliant comedy. I think it's like, I think especially for movie buffs like me, it's kind of made for someone who's a cinephile, but even if you're just a casual viewer, I've talked to a lot of people at work and outside who really enjoy it. It's consistently funny. It's really clever storytelling, and they have a lot of celebrities playing versions of themselves. And I mean, like Scorsese is in the first episode, and then you see like Adam Scott, Anthony Mackie, a bunch of others. It's a ton of fun. You got Seth Rogen, Catherine O'Hara, Catherine Hahn, Ike, is it Perkinoltz or Berkowitz? I didn't drawing about his last name, but he's hilarious too. Great cast, really, and it's really clever from a filmmaking perspective. Like they really play with camera angles, and like the famous like one take shot that's like you see in Goodfellas and stuff like that. They employ that for an entire episode in episode 2 in a really fun way. So yeah, it's a brilliant show. Apple TV has, ever since I resubscribed for Severance season 2, there's been so much on there. There's just a lot of great shows that I've missed in the last couple of years, and now I'm catching up on. But that one, it's just about done with its season 1, and it has been renewed for season 2. So I highly recommend that. That's one of my favorites right now. Other than that, Andor, I'm sure we'll do a full episode on. I know I talked about it on the last What's News episode. It's of course brilliant. And then Last of Us, I know, we texted briefly about that, so I know, because I come into the show, I've been watching the show from the beginning, and then I read about its differences to the game after, but I never played the game, so I'm experiencing all of the twists and everything for the first time, and I know, even based on what I've seen so far, I get the controversies of Game 2, but I'm just curious if you're still watching the show, because I know you're more of a fan of Game 1 and not as much Game 2. Are you still watching the show, though?
I'm still watching the show. Last episode was one of the weakest ones, in my opinion. They're progressing way too fast in this relationship together. It's like they're pretty much a married couple by any stretch of the word. It's like, hold on here. Time, flag on the play. But we'll get to that when we cover the series later on, because I know you're definitely going to have to do an episode for that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I agree. That last episode was a little more transitional, but I'm still enjoying it a lot. But, I also wonder, we'll get more in depth with an episode there, but I wonder, too, how much time has passed, even from when they leave Jackson to on their way to Seattle. So, there is some of that off-screen, building of the relationship. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a fair point. But yeah, those are my big ones. And then the Superman trailer. I don't know how many times I watched in the last 2 days.
Looks so great. I'm so ready for it. On my end, the one thing I've been able to actually read this whole time while preparing for the wedding and getting graduated is, at seminary, you read books that are assigned to you. And that's one of my least favorite things in the world, even though these are great books, but you tell me to do something. I picked up the first book that I've read in 3 years that I chose for myself. The Devils of D-Day, Graham Masterton. Is it the best book in the world? Absolutely not. It is kind of middling, middle of the road. But you know what? I chose to read it and I enjoyed it, even though it's not that great. And it feels good to choose a book and read it because I wanted to. I
know what you mean. When I graduated college, because I was an English major, so it was the same thing. I had that, I know a lot of friends were burnt out on reading after that. And I'm I get it. But for me, I couldn't wait to actually, like you said, read what I wanted to and just not be assigned something and have to worry about, okay, what am I going to have points to discuss on, or how am I going to write about this, etc. Just to be able to enjoy it, whether, like you said, it's the greatest book or not. It's just the experience of pleasure reading is liberating.
That was so great. But you didn't come here to talk with us this long about that. You came here because you were interested in the question, what if Leia was the one who trained her son, Ben Solo, who eventually in the sequel trilogy would become Kylo Ren. Will he become Kylo Ren in this canon that we're making up right now? Who knows? That's the fun. We're making it up on the fly. So before we actually head that way, Kevin, I cannot know if we've ever actually shared this before on the show. Maybe we did on the Last Jedi one we did, but what was your introduction to Star Wars itself?
That's it. When I was thinking about this question, I'm I feel like Star Wars has been in my DNA for as long as I can remember. I was watching the VHSs from such an early age, so I don't remember the exact age, but, I was born in 93. The special editions came out in 97. And then Phantom Menace came out in 99. I know I saw Phantom Menace in theaters, and, the hype around the prequels, and I grew up around that marketing, and you could not go to Toys R Us without seeing a massive flood of Star Wars action figures, and I had all of those. I watched the movies on repeat. So I was watching, all the movies from a very young age. So, I don't remember if it was my discovery myself, because my parents, of course, knew about Star Wars, but they're not big fans or anything. So it wasn't like, this kind of like passing on to me or anything like that. It was just, I think I just kind of discovered it, fell in love very early on. And so I watched those VHSs on repeat, and then eventually got the DVD special editions, all of that. So very early age. And then, as far as like extended universe stuff growing up, played a lot of the video games, and I was right at that age that was perfect when Battlefront and Force Unleashed were coming out, all of those, and then some of the books and comics. So yeah, I mean, it was always a part of me. It was fundamental to, why I do podcasting now, why I do writing. I mean, it was just like, it's like Star Wars and Batman, the animated series, and the whole DC animated universe were two of the most crucial pieces of like early intro that formed kind of my overarching geek and fandoms. So yeah. What about you though? Do you remember kind of like, because that was I don't remember like the first time, but do you remember like the first time you saw it?
I definitely remember the first time I saw him was probably on TV, if I remember correctly. My dad, back in the day, kids, so you had to do this fancy thing. If you wanted to rewatch a show whenever you wanted to, you had to have a VHS that was blank, and then you would record it when it came on TV, which means it came with commercials. My dad, tons of movies, learned it from his dad doing the same thing. So we would watch those together. Then when the VHSs came out, we watched those. Also, same thing, like when the movies came out in 97 in theaters, we were there. I remember my dad saying, that wasn't there in the original movie. They changed that. It's like, and you know what? It's fine. We're figuring things out from there. Then, of course, 99, like you mentioned, Phantom Menace comes out. Are they perfect movies? The prequel trilogy? Absolutely not. The originals aren't. Yeah, they're better movies. Like, to this day, Return of the Jedi is my favorite movie of all time. That is a heavily flawed movie, but one that still works, in my opinion. The prequel trilogy, inconsistently written. Like I said before, I think George Lucas, he lost his editor. He really needed one for those films, but they're still fun. They're enjoyable. It's still Star Wars to me. So from there, I started reading the expanded universe stuff. There's now Legends, according to Disney, when they made their own continuity. So I read pretty much almost every single book that came out. A lot of the comics, I'm catching up on some of those now that I have free time again. And then we get to the sequel trilogy, and I was hyped. I was like, yeah, Disney's doing it. Well, how could Disney screw this up? And there are going to be conflicting opinions as we get through this episode. If you've heard previous episodes before, a lot of our hosts were all over the place on the sequel trilogy. Force Awakens comes out. I was kind of, okay, I'm here for it. You've built a solid enough foundation. I don't think this is built on sand. And then, in my opinion, later movies proved that it was, because there was no plan. Now, there was also not really as big of a plan in the originals, but over time it became a plan.
Right.
Versus, I would argue we've gotten the sequel trilogy. So I have, shall we say, I'm the number one sequel hater on this show. I don't think anyone out there of our hosts hates it as much as I do. That doesn't mean I hate everything in it. And I'm using the word hate flippantly because I think it's funnier. Like, there are things to like in these movies. If you like the movies, I don't hate you. Like, I'm having a conversation right now with Kevin, who is far a different opinion than I. Like, so don't think this is an attack on you. It's an attack on poor writing.
No, and I really do encourage listeners to go back and particularly watch the Last Jedi episode, because that's honestly one of the most fun episodes we've ever recorded, I think. Even though we were on opposite ends of the spectrum there in terms of the debate, I thought it was a very healthy discussion, and we got to really engage in idea. And yeah, because I mean, honestly, my view of the sequel trilogy as a whole is less in the, oh, I love it or I hate it. It's really, I actually like, like Force Awakens, I thought was a solid start. Yes, it's very derivative, but it at least laid a foundation. I really enjoy Last Jedi. Even that's like you were talking about, like with Return of the Jedi. I do think it's still flawed, but I think it is a ambitious and really tactile movie that has some amazing elements of it, and that I think if they had continued in that direction, it would have been really good. I am not at all a fan of Rise of Skywalker, and I think that's where it tanked it for me. And so I have a very mixed, and but nonetheless, I like looking at kind of the things about the sequel trilogy that I do really like and the history of it. And I think with this episode we're doing now, this is a really fun opportunity to do a what if of okay, let's make our own fan fiction now. Because I have, with this question specifically, I'm like, ooh, I've got some ideas here on how this would, really alter the trajectory. And I'm excited to get your thoughts as well.
And one of the reasons we're so passionate about this is because we love Star Wars.
Right,
and once again, we're coming from different angles, but what is it about Star Wars that we love so much? What is Kevin Schaefer? Why does Kevin Schaefer love Star Wars?
I think for me, it's just that it not only is it the sweeping adventure and the mysticism, those are all core elements, but it was the series and the story that really inspired hope in me. It inspired just a love of grandeur and wonder, and the whole mythology of the Jedi was always so fascinating to me, and the different elements of it too. I mean, my avatar here for systematic geekology is Kanan from Star Wars Rebels. He's one of my favorite characters, and and if you go back and listen to the Getting to Know Me episode with Josh that I did a little over a year ago, I explained specifically why I chose that character and how it relates to my history with the church and with Christianity, and so I think with the Jedi, and you look at it's not just a clear black and white good and evil kind of story. It is there's these characters are more complex than you're initially introduced to them, and I love exploring that. But yeah, I just love exploring that. It's a comfort story. Whenever I'm having a terrible day, I can turn on the original trilogy, or I can turn on Rebels or Clone Wars or whatever, or the prequels. And, I just went to theaters for the Revenge of the Sith 20th anniversary with some friends, and it was an absolute blast. And that just brought me back so many memories of when that movie came out when I was in 5th grade. And, here I am 20 years later. And I think, it takes on new meaning too, with looking at it in real world perspectives, not to get too political, but just seeing how, but just dealing, Star Wars has instilled in me a way to, okay, how do I confront the darknesses of the world and in life and face it, kind of head on, and what can I learn from these characters and these stories? So it's something that's always stayed with me. That's why I love it. Yes, of course I love lightsaber fights and big battles, but it's really the characters, the emotions, all of those things, and the community that has brought me, some of my best friends, all over, and through this show and through so many others, Star Wars has brought us together, and we continually talk about it. And even when we have differing views on, which movie or story works and what doesn't, we can still come together and discuss it healthily, and we all love it,
Yes.
Here at Systematic Geekology, we believe in a few things. We believe that there is freedom in Christ to like what you like. We believe that Christian nationalism is a heresy. And probably most important that I'm going to talk about today, at least, is that we believe the best place to spend your extra cash is on the Systematic Geekology merch store. That's right. This is a shameless shill for our own products. We go through Creator Spring, and we have a few great products on there. Me personally, I'm a big black shirt kind of guy, muted colors. But there's nothing better to throw a little something extra on there with a black baseball cap, the dad hat with the Systematic Geekology logo on it. That's a classic. I just really think if you got a couple, $30 extra, that's for us.
Yeah. I mentioned my dad was a huge part of me loving this series as a whole. What I failed to mention is that when Phantom Menace did come out, and then when the Clone Wars came out, and Attack of the Clones, sorry, then Revenge of the Sith came out. Every single time they came out, even though he himself was a teacher at the time, he's since retired, he always took us out of school and brought us to the theater the day it opened, so we could watch some Star Wars together as a family. Mom, has never been a nerd on this side of things or a geek on this side of things. She has her own geeky thing she likes, as Pastor Will says, but they ain't anything that involves a lot of the stuff we cover. So everyone else would go to the movies. And it was a family experience. It was so much fun. I got to see, great characters on scene interacting with each other, struggling with their baser selves, and lightsaber fights and starfighter battles. In the midst of, as a kid, I didn't get the politics. Now, as I get older, I can appreciate it a little more of what's going on there. Even in the original series, there was some involved. As Andor showed up, there's plenty to be gleaned on that side of things if you care about that. And done extremely well in that show. But for me, Star Wars is just comforting and fun. Like you mentioned, hope. I've said it many times before. When it comes to Star Wars, that is the central theme. That is why, it didn't come out with the title Star Wars 4: A New Hope when it was originally released. But as time went on, that's exactly what that movie is. It is a new hope in a galaxy that needs hope. And then you go Empire Strikes Back. There's still hope, even with a bit of a bittersweet ending. Han Solo is gone, but there's still the hope Luke can be, better, retrain himself, and bring Han Solo back. And then Revenge of the Jedi. That was the original title, if you don't know. Return of the Jedi. Luke redeems his own father, this mass murderer who has caused all this death and destruction. And if you go with prequels too, that enhances that even more. Killed off his own friends. And the Emperor is gone. The Death Star 2 is gone. Yet the Empire hasn't been totally destroyed, but there is a hope that now, since the big bad guys are gone, they're going to crumble into something else. And then the good guys can come in. And is that oversimplifying things? Yes. But I was also a child when I first saw these movies. So I go, yes, I feel a hope. Now, as an older man, I can go, okay, well, people are corrupt, people are sinful, so things are going to be ruined along the way, blah, blah, blah. But there's still, even with that, I can say there's a hope, some of which was really taken away from me by the sequel trilogy, where I feel no hope at the very end. But for just that, that's what it means. Star Wars is hope. And as someone who believes in something very hopeful, that a Jewish guy, son of God himself, born of a virgin, came into this world, a perfect sinless man, died on a cross for my sake and for everyone who would say yes to him. That means the world to me. So when something can kind of bring that, and Lucas was inspired a little bit by Christianity, but mostly more like your Eastern religions, the dualism that kind of comes with them. But there was still some in there, and that's fine. You can like the things you like and add them into the stuff you're making up. Cool. And that makes me feel hope. Is like that good will win over evil, just like it does when I read in scripture, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. Everything that is evil in this world will pass away. So Star Wars gives me that hope, makes me feel good. And then, of course, you get into the world building side of things. We've got Jedi, Sith, like everything a kid loves. I'm still a kid at heart. A starfighter battle, lightsaber battle, you can get me hyped up in that. So there's more I can say, but we have other things to focus on this episode. So that's where I'm going to end right now.
No, that's right. And I'll just say, even Revenge of the Sith, which is as dark as it is, it doesn't end on an image of Vader or the Death Star. It ends on an image of on Tatooine and Obi-Wan handing over Luke to Owen and his wife and Beru, and saying the foundation of, okay, as dark as things are and the galaxy is overtaken by evil, here is the hope, because Luke is alive here, and we know how that story is going to go.
We do, because of certain movies, but other movies made that hopeful. So I'm sorry, I'm never going to stop.
You're good.
So to actually get to the question proper, to build up as a basis for, if you got one person out there who doesn't know, Kevin, can you help explain what happens in canon for those in the Disney canon for what happens to Ben becoming Kylo Ren?
Sure. So in the post events of the original trilogy, Ben Solo is the son of Han and Leia. He is initially raised and is and while Leia is helping form the New Republic, things are going well. I mean, there's still, the remnants of the Empire, and there's, organized crime. There's still obviously problems, and the New Republic is trying to find its footing. But, things are looking hopeful. Ben is Force sensitive. He is trained by Luke as part of Luke's new would-be Jedi Academy, this new era of the Jedi. And, as time goes on, there is a moment where Luke recognizes Ben's power. He sees something in him, and he sees this kind of vision similar to what we see in the prequel trilogy possibly with Anakin having premonitions and seeing potential futures. And that's when he sees that image of Padme dying, that's ultimately what sets him on a path to the dark side. Similarly here, Luke sees visions of Ben turning to the dark side, and in a moment of absolute fear and wondering if this could wreck everything that he's worked so hard to build. There's a moment of hesitation with him where he wonders if he should just end Ben's life then. It's a very dark moment for Luke, of course, but it only lasts a moment. He does not go through with it, but it is enough to terrify Ben, who is already being slightly lured to the dark side by the being known as Snoke. Who becomes the supreme leader of the First Order eventually. And so that is the moment that really turns Ben over to the dark side. He fights Luke briefly, escapes, and eventually destroys most of the would-be Jedi temple there and many of Luke's students. He turns to the dark side. He becomes Snoke's apprentice and ultimately rises up to help Snoke establish the First Order, which is essentially the second coming of the Empire, and they launch a war on the galaxy. This also causes a rift between Han and Leia. All of this happens really before the sequel trilogy starts, but Han and Leia are no longer together by the time of The Force Awakens, because, ultimately the pain of their son turning the dark side caused a rift there. And then the events of the sequel trilogy unfold from that point on. But yeah, that's so those are kind of the circumstances of Ben being very powerful and force sensitive, him being lured by Snoke, and then ultimately it's Luke having that moment where seeing the premonitions and the visions of him potentially turning the dark side strikes fear in him and makes him wonder, oh, should I just end it now instead of the cycle repeating itself? And in that moment, it provides a catalyst for Ben's turn to the dark side.
Yes, well said. I forgot to add this question in here. But what was your first impression of Kylo Ren? Watching Force Awakens, it coming out. Like, what do you think? What were you thinking when you saw him?
So I liked Adam Driver a lot, for one. And I thought he really commanded the role. I saw not as good as but I grew up on Avatar: Last Airbender, and I saw parallels between Kylo and Zuko. Not exactly, but just in that element of this kind of the kind of like emo kid wanting to prove himself, and he's tied to this legacy and everything. But is he as amazing as Vader? No. But I liked him as a villain. I thought he was commanding enough. And I thought, my initial impression from Force Awakens was, okay, this could easily be a character who does turn back, even though he kills Han Solo in his own father in Force Awakens, by far the darkest thing he's done. There was still that conflict in him. And so I think they were definitely set it up from the beginning of the ultimate, conclusion of his story could go either way. But yeah, I don't think he's the greatest villain in Star Wars, but I think he's definitely solid. So maybe not as cool as Maul and Vader, but I think he holds his footing very well and is compelling enough to watch. And I always loved the lightsaber. I remember the first time when the teaser trailer dropped and they had that was a cool effect to have the blade being like, the handle having 3 blades coming out of it, 2 smaller ones on the edge, and then the main one. I thought that was a cool design, so I always liked that from the beginning.
First watching it, knew like next to nothing. I knew he was supposed to be the bad guy. I think that before they had said that he was Han and Leia's son in the promotional material. They
never officially said it. It was like, I still remember people gasping in the theater at Force Awakens when Snoke says, "Your father, Han Solo," and that was when they. So they did their best to keep like secrets and stuff and not spoil anything, but I think for a lot of longtime Star Wars fans, especially who had read,
I think we figured it out. That's what it was.
Right, they figured it out. So it was kept under the wraps, but it was kind of for anyone who had read any of the Legends canon, and or even just kind of put pieces together. I think like people kind of suspected it, but they did save the reveal until the movie.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I think he has one of the best introductions in the series. On that one desert planet where
Jakku.
Is it Jakku? It's the same one. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's the same one that Rey is on. Okay,
right.
Sorry.
Right.
Where what's his name? Who's somehow a friend of Luke and is never explained because it's a different story for another time or whatever.
Max von Sydow
is there with information? Yes, Max von Sydow. That leads us back to Luke later on in the film. But I think you get the First Order showing up. What are they? You get this guy, and he looks cool. He's got his lightsaber with the little crossblade things there. That is incredibly impractical, but does it look cool? Absolutely. And then him stopping the blaster bolt
that
mid-air.
was awesome. Yes.
That's a great scene. Once again, if you think too much about it, say, okay, well, you stop that one. Are you going to stop the other ones that come after it? Don't worry about it. But for this scene right here, it looks pretty cool. So, okay, I'm behind this guy. Then he loses his effectiveness for me the more the film goes on. And some of that is intentional. Some of that is to show that he is kind of an angsty, not a teen, he's a little older, who has, some issues with his parents, it looks like, some issues with his grandfather being Vader. You go, okay, what's the story behind that? Please tell me that story. But does not get it developed as I would like. There's a scene where he kind of freaks out. And he just starts breaking stuff on his ship. It's like, okay, whiny child, but I'm still okay with that. You can be a little bratty there,
right?
And me still like you as a character,
right?
Then he kills his father. Was like, okay, I'm behind that. I know Harrison Ford probably said, I'll come back as long as you pay me a lot of money, and then I'm never coming back again until you give me more money, which is what happened in Rise of Skywalker. So I kind of knew Han Solo wouldn't make it out of the film. That's like an easy guess. But killing his own father to cement himself into the dark side, he appreciated that. The bowcaster shot that he gets hit by Chewie, that weakens him for the rest, I don't think is enough of a nerf to have him actually lose to Rey, who's never held a lightsaber before in her life. Same thing with Finn, who also missed opportunity completely with him, and I think with her too, but that's its own separate episode. So he works enough for me, but he loses his edge over time in the film. And the other films, I've stopped caring after a while.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I mean, I think
strong start.
No, I agree. I mean, it and there was enough there to where, okay, there's a lot of parallels to Anakin, but also still his own thing. And again, I think I liked that they set it up from the beginning of it could kind of go either way. He could be totally evil and never redeem himself, or they could set up an interesting redemption arc. Like I said, there were parallels to Zuko in that respect, and so I was okay with him being like a little whiny. He's, I think, trying to prove himself, and he's obsessed with the legacy of being Vader's grandson, and all that implies. And I think at his core too, it's not just about all that. He does genuinely want to make the galaxy better than it's been. He doesn't want it to devolve into chaos. He's obviously flawed in that, in terms of how he wants to go about it, but his actual motivation, I think, is there. He doesn't want, endless fighting and endless war. He wants to establish an order and even reject the notions of Jedi and Sith both and kind of create something new. So I always thought that was interesting. So I think, definitely solid start. Yes, there are many unresolved questions and unresolved plot lines throughout the trilogy, but from that initial intro, I think it was solid.
Yes, I'll agree wholeheartedly with that one. So going back a little bit, we know what happens in this canon, in Disney canon. So in Legends canon, Leia and Han have 3 kids. They have Jason and Jaina, they're twins, because twins, Star Wars. Something I think I didn't have to do it in the sequel trilogy, would have been nice. And then Anakin, their younger son. They're a year apart, if I remember correctly. So Jason and Jaina, they grow up with them for a bit. Then as they learn about their Force sensitivity, they go to Luke's academy that's on Yavin 4. He sets up because it's a place strong in the Force. It's a place that has a lot of historical significance to him. So across the way, they have their own little misadventures. They've got their own kids series, Young Jedi Knights, that has differing quality, but for the most part, I would say is positive. Then you get into what is known as the Yuuzhan Vong War / the New Jedi Order, where it's a very divisive set of novels. I love them dearly, despite their many flaws. But you have an alien race from outside the galaxy come in that are immune to the Force itself, and they attack the galaxy and wipe out a bunch of people. And you have Jason, who has been growing up as like this jokey kind of character, get a little darker as time goes on in his understanding for it. Jaina as well. Best character in Star Wars, by the way. Absolutely. She's my number one. Become kind of a pilot, but also a Jedi, while also struggling with her darkness as the events of the war go on. Anakin is kind of being set up as like the new Luke in many respects until... from what I understand, Lucas comes in and says, you can't have another guy named Anakin. People are going to get confused. Kill him off. And he gets killed off midway through the New Jedi Order, even though they were really setting him up to be the guy. So Jason becomes the guy. And you have a great series with him and Verger, a very misunderstood book called Traitor, one of my favorite books of all time, where she teaches him, look, hey, like dark side, light side. I'm not saying that they're equally good, equally bad. I'm saying if you use force lightning, like to power up a generator, is that such a bad thing? You Jedi have your Jedi mind trick on the weak-minded, you say? That's supposed to be a good guy ability? And there's some nuance that's added there. So it has since been made a heresy in that canon that you can apply the two, but it's misunderstanding what it is. Isn't saying that dark side and light side, there's no difference. It's saying it's how you apply it. So because people don't understand nuance, they then retcon Jason into falling into the dark side later on, where he becomes just as bad as his grandfather, murders a bunch of people, murders Mara Jade, who thank God canon hasn't touched her. I don't know what they would have done with her at this point. And ends up where he has to be killed by Jaina, and that's its own thing. About that point was when the acquisition happened, and they stopped writing more books after that. So that's how they did it in Legends. Well, some positive, some not so positive, and then this is how they're doing it in canon. So just as like a side-by-side comparison.
Sure. And I think it informs kind of like how we'll approach this too, to look at those two designs. And also, like there's a bunch of videos and stuff you can watch about the original plans for the sequel trilogy because of through the George Lucas treatments. And a lot of those have, commonalities with the Legends canon, and there are still ideas from that made it over into the sequel trilogy. They were just heavily reworked and reimagined. But yeah, so I think all of those inform kind of how we're going to approach this what if, the story today.
Yeah. All right. So Kevin, about 40 minutes into this conversation, what is the point of divergence here that makes Leia decide to train her son instead of Luke? Because in the actual Disney canon, she gives him away, not like giving away her rights as a mom, but like to be trained away from her.
I think I was thinking about this of, okay, what would be the key differences? If she's training her, what would she want to instill in Ben? I think it boils down to Leia being both force sensitive and being a political leader and seeing, okay, I don't want to, repeat the mistakes of the past. She's very familiar with the political history of the galaxy from the Republic era to the Empire to now what it is. And she wants to make it the best she could be. And she sees, okay, she has a son who is very force sensitive. Obviously, she loves her brother. She knows Luke would be a great teacher. But could she do something different? And because the Jedi famously were separate from the political dealings of, and during the prequel era, they always had this mistrust toward politicians. And, in some ways rightfully so, because the politician that was had the most power ended up becoming the emperor. So I get that. But she also comes from a world where her father was a politician and he was a great man. She was raised to be a leader of how you get and saying that politics can be good if you have good people, good values, good ideals, and if you're working together to create something better than what came before. And I think with that in mind, she decides at some point to say, okay, my son is force sensitive, I'm force sensitive, and I also want him to grow up around this stuff and, and see how the leadership of the galaxy can fundamentally change things, and hopefully for the better in this case. So I think in that case, as not as a diss to her brother, but Luke has his Jedi going on, but I think it's a matter of let me try to train my son both as a Jedi and also as a potential leader for, one day, because I want to make the New Republic as the best it can be. So it's not so much an insight, like someone dies or something like that. It's just a decision I think she would make to challenge everything that had come before and try to break a barrier between the leader she's surrounding herself with and the person she is, and then the Jedi. And instead of having this disconnect and rift between them, let's try to have someone who is kind of immersed into both worlds.
Okay. I like that idea. Mine will go differently, and we can decide what to do after this.
Sure.
Because we can do whatever we want in this episode, because we're the ones making the story.
Yes.
My idea was to break away from the canon, to have her train him instead. Something kind of drastic needed to happen. Mm-hmm. And since she herself is also as force sensitive as Luke is, he's just more trained than she is. I would say it would happen even before this decision is made. Maybe Luke gives her more training to devote herself to the Force a little bit. And as part of that, she's a little more attuned to the Force. Now, still being the politician, still being the spokesman, still trying to bring peace in that area. But have her have a similar vision to what Luke has before, he's taken away.
Right.
And real quick, sidetrack. There are two interpretations of that scene, by the way. One is the unreliable narrator section with Kylo, which is what most of the people on my side are not literate enough to understand is not what actually happened. I've only ever watched the film once, but even I realized that wasn't what actually happened. Mm-hmm. Then you have the second time around where it's Luke never had the lit lightsaber above him. Mm-hmm. He was thinking about it, going to be using it.
Right.
And that's what made Kylo attack him. So
Right.
That two separate things. So Leia sees this, goes, if he goes there, that's his fate. Maybe she thinks that's what a vision is. She thinks maybe Luke kills him. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that causes some family trials. She's like, no, what if I did it instead? And the thinking being, it's like, okay, yeah, he can learn things that only Luke could teach him, but he can also learn things that only I can teach him, because Luke's not a politician. So she knows enough of the Force. She's trained enough with Luke to be a competent teacher in her own right. She can not make her own separate school, but make a separate, almost like a homeschool kind of setting for Kylo, where he is also traveling to all these other worlds, embracing these other cultures and learning about them, so that she can raise him this way. And hopefully, seeing all the good that she's doing, he doesn't get, seduced by the dark side in the same way. Mm-hmm. So what do you think? Where are we at here?
I like that kind of combine, actually, because that was the only thing I was lacking, was kind of a central catalyst there. So I like that a lot. If she can see that, so if she has that vision too, because I think that this is what comes back to the premonitions that Anakin had, and that that Luke and Leia might have too. So I like seeing that theme. So instead of it actually happening where Luke, momentarily turns on Kylo or Ben at that point, instead it's Leia sees that vision and says, okay, this is my number one fear. I don't want him to ever be in a situation where he would turn to the dark side. Let me train him. I like that a lot. And then similar to my ideals of this, then creates a kind of different path for him in terms of, instead of the older ways of the Jedi, this is kind of a more modern context where he can be raised both as a Jedi and around the political world and what it looks like to be a leader there. So I think just merging our ideas together there works really well.
Something where Jedi isn't his only personality, which is what you would get in the Old Republic.
Exactly.
As things got lost along the way, they became more rigid versus, I'm a Jedi, but I can also be this.
Right.
Just I'm I can be a Christian, but I can also like Star Wars.
Yes,
I can have a personality outside of worshiping Jesus, which is my primary thing I'm about. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean I also can't look up other things. I can't explore other things, even though I'm sticking to this. Yeah.
It's why I like Kanan so much, that he's like, I can be a Jedi and fall in love and not let it, consume me with, passion and rage in the way that Anakin did. It's like him and Hera's relationship is beautiful. But yeah.
It's called moderation and love.
Yes.
Something. If you actually taught your students that, maybe most of them would learn the lesson.
Right.
But if we just conform everyone to this standard, no one will ever break, even though there's plenty of people who
we'll
do.
never have any problems. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So So we mentioned on the political side of things, he'll probably get some more knowledge. What do you think? How does she teach Ben differently than Luke would besides anything, or even expand upon that?
I think because, they had two very different upbringings. She was raised by Bail Organa and her mother, and raised on Alderaan, and seeing really the formation of the rebellion come together, seeing all these aspects. So I think she would train him to maybe not be so distrustful toward every politician, and also be more open-minded in a sense, because I think Luke would still be, his training would still be different from the ways of the old Jedi Council, because he also was raised in a different, he's trained by Obi-Wan, trained by Yoda, but he was raised in a time of post-Jedi Council. So his views are still modified, but I think Leia would instruct Ben to be, open-minded, to see the good in people who are figures of authority who are trying to do good, not see corruption everywhere, and to, and I think they could say, even though it's like you said, kind of sort of like a homeschool kind of thing, I think there would still be learning from Luke as well. It's just he wouldn't be with with his academy. Exactly. I think she would try to provide as much of a well-rounded education for him as possible, both in terms of how to use the Force and what it means, and exploring the notions of that, and leaning on Luke for a lot of that, but also, learning about how does the world in this time period look, and what can we learn from the past? What can we learn now, and what are we trying to do to make the galaxy better than what came before, and provide people with hope and stability going forward? So projecting all of those kind of ideals, trying to teach him as much about history, as much about the Force, as much about controlling emotions, and when to fight, and when to hold back, and when to be at peace, and find love, and find comfort with people. So I think it would be kind of, when you combine kind of a Jedi education with the kind of upbringing that she had, I think you make something really interesting, and possibly really beneficial and really fruitful for Ben, because so much of his rage stemmed from, and that's the other thing. I think she would be very, with the Ben Solo, Kylo Ren we know idolizes Darth Vader, idolizes the villainous figure that Anakin Skywalker became. I don't think Leia would shy away from teaching everything she could about her grandfather, and about his grandfather and where he came from, because, and to let him know that okay, this is the path that he went on, and ultimately it led to destruction. And I don't think she would want him to know as much as possible about how the Empire came to be, why it happened, and how the rebellion came to be. And looking at Luke's, I think she would try to instill in him as much knowledge as possible, so that to give him the tools to discern right from wrong, and to hopefully chart a better path for him. Because I think that's one thing that the Jedi in the old days are notorious for, is keeping things and trying to control mindsets, and trying to, and look where that got him. So I think Leia would take a different approach and say, no, I want to instruct as much as I can, and share as much knowledge as I can, because I believe my son will make the right decisions, and if he has the right upbringing, ultimately I can't control the outcome, but I want to give as many tools as possible to use the power he has wisely.
Yeah, that's great, because Luke and Leia are both compassionate in different ways. And either one would be a great teacher in that regard. But I think on her side of things, seeing the plight of the people and being physically involved in a lot of it would be very helpful to a young man growing up in all the midst of all this. I was looking up some things that I had forgotten, couldn't remember where they were, but a major part that has been revealed in the novels, which once again, let me just say, I have not read these. It's just looking it up on Wikipedia, is why Leia does not have as many defenders at the start of Force Awakens. compared to, say, other continuities is because around 28 years after the Battle of Yavin, it's outed that she is the daughter of Vader. I think the book is called Bloodlines. And this causes people to take away support from her, to view her as a monster despite everything, as opposed to Legends canon, where it's kind of revealed very early on. And it's not to say that no one cares, because people do, but it's not the same knee-jerk reaction. Oh, she was this, therefore every bit of goodwill she's done, let's just kick her out. So just differences between the timelines there. So when does Force Awaken happen? Was it like in the 30s ABY?
About
Awakens.
that, yeah. Like, let's see,
34. So this would be 6 years before the events,
right?
Let's see. Kylo Ren, Ben Solo is born in. Let's see. He's born in 5 ABY. Well, that's real early.
So he is a little. Because there's also a comic that covers when Poe Dameron is born too. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So with all that in mind, that's in canon that is learned, but he's away from home.
Right.
Here, it happens, doesn't happen. And he sees what happens to his mom, maybe as a result, or like, how do you think, is he going to handle it this as well? Is he going to be angry at the people who outed her? Is that going to cause some resentment in him?
Yeah, and this brings me to, I know there's a bunch of different versions of, this might even just be some of the like YouTube videos I've watched of like rewriting the sequel trilogy and stuff like that, and building on George Lucas's treatments. But like, yeah, there's that idea that, someone like Kylo might go back and forth. And I think this would cause some resentment for him, not obviously toward Leia, but to the people. And, it might say, like, I don't know if it would tempt him to the dark side, but it would make him frustrated with, how do I become, a leader when even someone as strong as my mom gets, criticism just because of her lineage, and how am I ever going to escape that? So I think my hope here is that it would present a good challenge for him, and that he would want to make a new legacy for that. Because again, the thing, I know, not a fan of Last Jedi, I get it, but going back to that moment in Last Jedi where he says, let's do away with the past, let's do the Jedi, Sith, all of it, I think that's what a core aspect of Ben Solo's character is. He wants to move forward, and he wants to set a new course for himself and for the Jedi Order, for the galaxy. I think that would still very much be instilled here, where he would want to reclaim, not even reclaim, but to make a new name for his family and his legacy, and not be all the way tied to the past. And just because he is the blood grandson of Anakin Skywalker doesn't mean that he has to go down that path. And so I think this would really chart an interesting course of a trajectory for him as the hero in this regard. I think with all this, if Leia is training I gotta stop saying Kylo because he's not going to be Kylo in this, but if Leia is training Ben Solo, and, he's raised both in kind of a Jedi involved in terms, okay, then even if he had been tempted by Snoke in the past, I don't think he's going to go down this path this time. I think he's going to be more standing with, because now Leia and Han are still together. They're going to face the political struggles together. And, Luke still has his academy. I think now, instead, Snoke would, and Palpatine, even though I hate to bring that up, because, like, I want Palpatine to be dead. But that's all another thing. But, like, I still have my gripes here. But anyway, Snoke, I think then in this case, would go after Rey as his apprentice. Because in this case, he would want someone equally powerful and also way more vulnerable in this situation. Because now, if Ben is able to, if he never has that moment where, Luke is tempted to kill him and that whole riff happens, and, he's trained by Leia, things are good on that end, and he wants to fight for his family, and he wants to be on the side of, making the New Republic what it is. I think he's less susceptible to fall to Snoke. So in that regard, then who does Snoke turn to? He needs someone else really powerful and also way more vulnerable, because if Snoke goes after Rey when, you know, she's very young, she is way, even though we know her as the optimistic hero, she is so much more vulnerable to turning to the dark side than I think Ben even ever was, because she does not have the family stability. She is an orphan. She has no connections. She doesn't know who she is, and she is discovering all this power. She could easily be manipulated and fall to the dark side and become the massive weapon for the First Order and for its reemergence. And so I think that it would create a this question. So I was so excited to answer, because like I think this would fundamentally alter the course of the sequel trilogy, and you not only switch roles, but you make it way more interesting too, because instead of just a legacy character becoming the villain, have someone who I mean, I guess technically, like in this universe, we have to make her Palpatine's granddaughter or whatever, but even whether or not that's the case, regardless, she's an orphan. She has no connections. She's searching for who she is, and again, even though we've seen her in the movies as someone more good, if she had been targeted by Snoke earlier on, she could have been much more susceptible to falling to the dark side and being trained and groomed by Snoke and by the First Order and rising up to becoming its greatest weapon. And I think that would create a fascinating story going forward, and would lead to a lot of conflict between a class conflict between her and Ben, but also maybe Ben would be able to turn her at some point. I think that would be a really interesting storyline to play out. And then I think with that, I think Finn would still have the arc of be in the same place he is at the beginning of Force Awakens, where he's raised as a stormtrooper. He can't go through with it. He leaves. But then I think if he goes off with Ben, maybe then they could have explored the Force sensitive angle with him much earlier on. And what if he had become Ben's apprentice? And and now we have so yeah, that's kind of my overall. Yeah. And then as far as I know, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but these are just my initial, throw out, what if beats for this story. So I think that you have Ben and Finn together, and then, I'm sure Poe would be in there as well. And then Rey is the main villain, the main apprentice, and is ultimately trying to gain control over the whole First Order and may eventually turn on Snoke. And I think this is where I would still have loved to have all the original trilogy characters to have a moment together. I think that I would make that happen here. But I think instead of Han dying at the end of the first one, I think it would be Rey killing Luke here, because I think at this point, Rey becomes really powerful. Ben is wanting to go after and fight her, but Luke wants to step in here. He still has his Jedi Academy, and he is still powerful enough, and he still wants to be the one to protect everyone here, and especially his nephew and his sister. So he would be the one to go fight Rey, but she outpowers him and is the one to kill him. And so, that would be kind of how the first movie would end, and would set up an arc here. And this is where, because I'm sure you're going to be shocked by this, of what character I would bring in for a sequel, but this is where I think Ahsoka would then come in to take Luke's place as training the next generation of Jedi, because I think Ben and Finn would still be doing kind of their own thing, learning together, but you would need someone else to train the students that Luke leaves behind, and to also be, someone to challenge Rey as a mentor figure. So these are kind of my overall these come out with the ideas.
Hey, podcast fam, want to stay even more connected with the show? We've got you covered. Check us out on Instagram and Blue Sky, where we're posting exclusive content and bonus videos and fun updates that you won't get anywhere else. From sneak previews of upcoming episodes to bonus content, our social accounts are the best way to keep the conversation going. Plus, it's a great spot for you to interact with other listeners and share your thoughts. We love hearing from you. When you follow us, it helps us grow and continue bringing you the content that you love. Whether it's a funny poll, a quick clip from today's episodes, or just random thoughts, you're feeling feel more plugged into everything we're doing. So go ahead and hit that follow button on Instagram and Blue Sky. It's one more way to be a part of the show and keep the good vibes flowing. Thanks for being a part of the family, and we can't wait to see you there.
Is that what were some of your, like, as you were thinking about this, as far as how this should ultimately affect the trajectory of the story as a whole? What were some of your ideas?
No, I like this a lot. There's a lot to go through for what you said, but the idea, okay, we want a Skywalker. Let's go after a well, even though he's a solo, a Skywalker.
Right.
And that doesn't happen, not because Ben doesn't have any tendencies to head towards the dark, which could be taken advantage of by the Rey we're creating in this scenario.
Sure.
For what would be our Last Jedi film in the middle here. Far better, I would hope. We have a solid enough premise there because that forces Snoke, who is he's supposed to be like a failed clone of the Emperor, right? Is that what the ultimate reveal is?
They never, even then, they never really like go into that, at least in the movies. I think there's more expanded universe content where they get into that. But he's basically just kind of a figurehead.
Yeah, all I can think of with Snoke is the Rian Johnson picture of him saying, "Your Snoke theory sucks," and I'm like, "Well, of course it sucked. No one know who he's supposed to be." So that's its own issue. But let's assume a failed clone of Palpatine, so powerful enough to be, force sensitive, manipulate people and the like.
Sure.
So my plan A was get Ben Solo to follow the dark side. That failed. What now? Looks like none of Luke's students are going to be worthy of doing that. What if, instead of making that plan B, plan C, I find someone else who has no attachments anywhere, someone easily manipulated like Rey would be in that scenario. So he expands his, scrying through the Force, as it were, maybe even brings the attention of Luke to him, and that's why he didn't do that. But he goes after Rey. Maybe even have a confrontation scene where Luke tries to save her, fails because Snoke brought a bit more backup than he was expecting. Takes Rey, makes her his apprentice. Luke has no idea who she is, so he can't find her. In frame of reference, 28 ABY in Disney canon is where the Jedi Academy falls. Leia gets outed in the original timeline, so that would be around when this would be happening. Force Awakens takes place, if I remember correctly, 34 ABY, so that's 6 years. It doesn't have to be 6 years from now. We can say it's enough time to be trained by Snoke for Rey. We can give her a Darth name if we really want to. But yeah, whatever, because Ben does rename himself Kylo Ren. Kylo Gal, whatever, for this scenario. And it would probably be something different, though, in that she would take inspiration from elsewhere. Maybe Isolatus or something like that, because she's isolated. Just throw the first idea thrown out at the wall. And then, of course, like you said, Finn would probably be same thing. There would be no changes to him until we get to that scene where he goes, "Oh, I can't do this. This is too much." But it would be under different circumstances because, they're not looking for the information about Luke because he's still in the galaxy. Maybe they could still do it. And this guy is someone they could use as leverage to maybe get Luke to come to try and bail him out or something. And that's why they're there, is to capture him. And maybe he gets killed in the crossfire, or even maybe get captured. And that's where Finn is like, I can't do this. And so in that scenario, maybe Ben senses this, goes that way, and that's how he meets up with Finn and Poe as they're dealing with this. And they become our trio for this film. Deal with Rey as well, be introduced to her, and go, "Oh, this is the path I could have gone on." If things had gone differently, we're gonna have that one moment. We go, "Yeah, guys, this could have been different because it's an alternate universe." Okay, yeah, I like it.
Also, if Disney ever does a What If Star Wars animated series, please have Jeffrey Wright still narrate it, because that's, I think, one of the best parts of the Marvel What If is just his voice doing at the beginning as the Watcher. Oh, it's so amazing. But yeah, I want Jeffrey Wright to narrate every universe. He just has one of the best voices ever. But yeah.
But he does have a good voice as a Watcher. Yeah, so at this point, we've got a Ben who's got both his parents, Leia, Han. So you're having... See, that's why I might disagree with you of Luke being the one to sacrifice, because in this specific scenario, yeah, he's still his uncle, but he's not as close with him here. So that leaves me with Leia being the sacrificial lamb instead, since he's closer to his mom. And now we're not killing Han Solo again.
And that way, too, as much as it would be painful to watch Leia die, it would set up an arc for Ben to, by the end of the trilogy, become like what she would have become, the leader of the New Republic. And, to have a Jedi in that role, I think, have it come full circle, like that would be really cool, and to set a new course there.
And I think in our second film here, we have the idea of, you're the one who murdered my mother, but I'm also at that same time having these weird feelings of attraction towards you. Like, how did you become who you are? Like, maybe I can redeem you. Like, let's date for Jesus here, date for the Force. And that probably goes terribly. And he is, maybe Rey isn't completely irredeemable, but like for right now, he's given up on trying to redeem her. And she takes control of the First Order, kills Snoke, uses him as a patsy. And it's like, we can rule the galaxy together.
Yes.
And he says no and leaves because he's got a renewed anger towards her, but it's not in the same way where he's going to fall. It's just enough to where if he's not careful, he could go that way.
Right. I like that a lot.
Probably having a great scene with Han.
Yes. And I also think this is one of the best scrapped ideas from, I know this is one I vent about a lot, that they scrapped the original episode 9 by Colin Trevorrow called Duel of the Fates. It would have ended with a duel between Kylo and Ren on why am I talking about on Mortis, which is the like Force conduit planet from the Clone Wars. I still would have loved to have that take place here, and for it to be literally this, like, come full circle, have this duel on a planet that literally revolves around the Force and is this kind of world between worlds. So I would have loved to have that. I think it would still ultimately end with I don't think there's any way for Rey to really come back from all of that, but I think maybe they could even, like, if she dies at the end, maybe there's something that he can give to her, that words or something that would put her at peace, and maybe she does become one with the Force still by the end, even though she can never really redeem herself with with the public at that point. But if she could have kind of moment similar to Vader in Return of the Jedi, of peace within.
I was going to say, like, this is where she finds out, if we're keeping the Palpatine thing because we have to, this is where she finds it out. He reveals himself, and that there's that whole scene of her conflicting loyalties of like, I wanted to rule everything, but now Grandpa's doing it. Well, still also kind of technically her dad. It's his own thing. It was a clone of Palpatine that was her father, if I remember correctly. Goodness gracious. So
I know.
Didn't you have that scene of maybe Ben's about to die, Palpatine's got him dead to rights, and she skewers him from behind, but he uses some of his Force abilities to bind her to him, and she kind of does the reactor scene, but different for Exegol.
Right.
And it's like, she hasn't redeemed herself, but she did something that did a benefit that gained her nothing.
Yeah.
To save someone else.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. And that comes like, and again, then you have at the very end, Ben, becoming the leader of the New Republic. You have Finn there at his side. Poe, and like probably would need like some other new characters too. To play with as well. But yeah, so
if we were actually writing the script, totally would do that.
Right, absolutely, yeah. But I like that though. I think just changing this, Leia would have a profound impact on Ben's trajectory. No diss to Luke, but this would change things drastically. Yeah.
Plenty of disses to this Luke, who compared to his Legends counterpart is nothing. So I still think Luke would have been perfectly fine. I still don't think he would have hesitated, being like, oh no, my nephew is having these bad thoughts, might turn to the dark side. I don't see him going for his lightsaber. I see him going, oh, I redeemed my father, who did far more terrible things. Let me work with you and do this. But they did what they did. So I have to accept that's what this Luke would do.
Right. Yeah. So, but I like this a lot, though. This would be fun. Well, now if Disney ever wants to do this as an animated, they have our thoughts here, and they can, they can hire us to write the script.
Workshop it.
Yep.
I'm sure there's some flaw we haven't thought about. If you guys know something else, they'll say, did you consider this? Hey, send it our way. Constructive criticism, always welcome here. If you say, oh, this sucks, it's like, okay, let's have some better words here we can use. But you got anything else you want to add for a what if scenario here?
Not that I can think of. These are really fun to do. I mean, again, I really hope they do that. I mean, there's so many potential stories you could play with, in particularly in an animated series or in a comic. So I don't know why they haven't done this yet. But this was a lot of fun just to explore. And I'll probably be still thinking about it after, like, ways I could have even added more to it. But no, this was a ton of fun. I mean, yeah, I love Star Wars. I always love Star Wars fan fiction is incredibly fun.
Okay. So we do have a special bonus question today. We mentioned them a couple times, but there's a fan theory out there that explains maybe this is why Kylo Ren is as powerful as he is, because he doesn't just have one Force-sensitive parent. He has two. And that question is Han Solo Force-sensitive? And if you want to know our answers, you can go to Captivate, Patreon, throw a little money our way, see what we have to say, because I'm not saying it right now if I give it away. So, Kevin, anything else you want to throw in for this before we head to our wrap-up?
I don't think so. Just I want to thank everyone for listening.
Okay.
We really appreciate it.
All right. So, recommendation, what do you have?
So, not Star Wars related, but if you're a fan of kind of like alternate universe stuff like this, we've talked a lot about it on Comic Book Catch Up, but both the DC Absolute Universe and then Marvel's Ultimate Universe. The one I would recommend the most, I think, out of all of them would be Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman.
Yes.
I think it's just, flawless storytelling. If you want, it's not just a fun what if, like, okay, what if, Peter Parker didn't get his powers till much later. It's so much more than that. This is just such a well thought out universe, and that's one of the best comics out there right now. So definitely jump on that if you're a Spider-Man fan and you like this kind of alternate, because you don't have to deal with years and years of continuity. You get a nice fresh story. You can pick it up from the beginning, and it's so much fun what it does with those characters.
Yeah. Throw that out there too. Great series. My only real complaint is that it doesn't focus on Peter as much as I would like. It's more the supporting cast, which is fine. Cast is not there.
Yeah.
But we do have a main character we need to study too.
True.
And Hickman is far superior to anything Marvel is doing in the main continuity in their main Spider-Man books right now. And you've heard me rant about that enough. But you've also heard me rant enough about Star Wars, except for this Andor season 2. If you have not watched this and you consider yourself a Star Wars fan, I'm telling you, you are failing yourself. This is Star Wars. It is a different flavor of Star Wars, but it is Star Wars filled to the brim with everything you need. Does it still attach itself to things I don't like that happen later on that makes Mon Mothma an idiot who demilitarizes the New Republic? That's its own thing. For right now, just celebrate the fact that she's doing her job and she's doing it well and she dances like a queen. So if you want to enjoy a good show, go check out some Andor. So guys, thank you for all that you do. Please, you get a chance to leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. You can suggest episode topics to us. Like, you guys voted on this. I forgot to mention that at the very beginning. You voted on this in Facebook. Out of all the choices we presented, we had a fun time doing it. We talked for over an hour on it. We're not supposed to, but we did it anyways, because we want to please you, not because we just like talking. If you guys have any questions, concerns, something you want to throw our way, you can email us at systematicgeekology@gmail.com. We've got a Discord server you can go to as well. We've got plenty of other places you can reach out to us. I'd like to shout out some patrons real quick, some supporters on Apple, Captivate, and Patreon. Thank you, Aaron Hardy, Daniel Sigmund, Trip Fuller, and James Barrett. You guys are the best. But remember, we are the chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hey guys, again, thank you so much for listening to our show and being part of the Systematic Geekology team. If you want to support our team, you can do so by going to Captivate. And I know most people don't listen on Captivate, but it's in the description wherever you're listening. You can go to our website. At the very bottom, you have the options to either subscribe and you'll get some extra content and fun stuff, like our bonus questions, all those kind of things that hopefully you all come to love as much as I love making them with our fellow geekologists on the team. We also are hoping to do some future D&D campaigns, stuff like that, and all that's available for our sponsors. But if you don't have those extra funds and you're not really into the subscription thing, you can also leave a one-time tip, just one-time thing to help out our show as we kind of stay in the game with podcasting, keep relevant with all the technology and all that stuff. And it costs a lot to run a show, and we appreciate you for your help. Again, thank you so much for listening. We value your time, and it means a lot to us that you give us your time by listening to our show and supporting us in that way. If you feel led to support financially as well, we appreciate that. Let's get back to the show.
Hello, Systematic Geekology listeners. This is Kevin here. Just want to give a brief ad for some of the other podcasts in our Anazao podcast network. First of all, off is Let Nothing Move You by Christian Ashley, in which Christian goes through the Bible one chapter at a time and gives his thoughts there. There is also the Bible After Hours, which is a more progressive take on the Bible that tries to challenge the status quo with satire and looks at theology. The host uses the pseudonym The Foul-Mouthed Preacher. And as a bonus, Joshua Knoll does the voices for this one. So definitely check that one out. And also, and we'll laugh about that later, is the newest podcast that our own Will Rose is starting, where he will interview friends about a story they had that wasn't funny at the time, but that they laugh about now. So definitely check out these shows and subscribe to us wherever you get your pods. Thank you very much.